you allow me, I want to add something to the environment of investment. I think right now, because of the lack of transparency of the investigations, I'm sure, and that was reported in the Financial Times, that international investors will back down from investing today in Saudi Arabia. This lack of transparency is opening the door for all kinds of rumors. I received information, credible information from Riyadh that the settlement that is taking place between some royalties and the government of Saudi Arabia, they are paying the money back to the Ministry of Finance. There's a special account created at Ministry of Finance. But many people do not trust that, are not sure of that. Since the purge on corruption started, our general prosecutor, nor the Crown Prince himself, come out to the public and lay out the details.
If this is a crackdown on corruption, are we going to see accountability?
There has to be accountability, but we need more transparency. We need laws that govern the future of Saudi Arabia.
This is precisely the rub between Jamal and Fahad's analyses, which is that the lack of clear process, the lack of clear rules and clear process has spooked investors. There's no question it has spooked investors, and it will in the short run. Now, where Fahad may have a point is that in the long run, if people get the sense that Saudi Arabia is much more orderly, less corrupt, then investors will be pleased.
Will help us.
So it depends on the outcome. As with everything that the King and Crown Prince are doing, the outcome will determine everything, and I agree with you 100%. It's a very large bet on 31 red on a roulette wheel here, and it better fall on 31.
Okay, I want to bring in Maysar on this. Maysar, do you think that there is widespread support in Saudi Arabia for what we're seeing right now?
You mean for the reforms and what's happening now about the country? Actually, this is, as I said, it's like a right time to apply that reforms in Saudi Arabia, because this is a short message from our Prince Mohammed bin Salman to develop and stand by the country to improve it.
Hussein, I want to get to you and talk about the style of government or style of rule in Saudi Arabia in the context of what is going on right now. You have written that this purge or clean sweep has completely upended the structure of the Saudi elite and the country's way of doing business.
Yeah, well, I didn't have in mind just these arrests. What I had in mind is the kind of restructuring that actually Jamal was describing. And I agree with you completely that we can date it to about 2015. And probably begins, if you wanted to note a signal event, the removal of Prince Mohammed, who was the crown prince at the time, and the elevation of Prince Nayef, Mohammed bin Nayef, and then as the deputy crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. And then we had a series of other measures, of other administrative changes, restructurings, and arrests, different arrests of sometimes of journalists, sometimes of clerics, some mixture of reactionary clerics and some reformists, and most of them, they were quite right-wing, but changes to the role of the religious police, who were stripped basically of almost all of their enforcement capabilities, and all of these social, economic, and cultural measures, and now this gesture as well. And in the middle of all of that, of course, the removal of the new crown prince, the then new crown prince, Mohammed bin Nayef, and the elevation of Mohammed bin Salman to be the crown prince. So what you've seen essentially is a dual process that was described very well by my colleagues of consolidation and centralization of power, which is a fait accompli. I mean, it's really done on the one hand, and a desire to drag the society willingly at some level and unwillingly at other levels into the future, by its lapel, if need be.
Jamal, what Hussein talks about, this centralization of power, there's a very prominent Arab commentator, Rami Khouri, who says that this kind of one-man rule is a failed and destructive model for governance. He points to the fact that it was tried in Egypt, in Iraq, in Syria, and it's failed.
Actually, I said that repeatedly in previous interviews and on an article. That's what I fear most for my country. One-man rule. One-man rule in the Arab world always ends with a disaster. Great leaders like Jamal Abdel Nasser, he was patriotic. He was needed by the people. He was supported by his people. But it ended up with a disaster. One-man rule make the person immune from accountability, and he will create a shield between him and positive advises. That is exactly what is happening in Saudi Arabia. There is no vocal voice today in Saudi Arabia that could criticize or argue or give an argument about any decision, whether it is about economic decision. For example, I have my views about MBS top-down approach of developing Saudi Arabia.
MBS is Mohammed bin
Salman.
Yeah.
I would much rather to do from the bottom up. Our cities are falling apart. As Fahad said, the city of Jeddah is falling apart, and we see that every time rain falls in Jeddah. Rather than building a new futuristic city that run by robots, we need to look for what we have in our hands. There is two cities that have failed or not fully succeeded that were built from the top down. King Abdullah Financial City, and MBS is struggling how to put it in business. It's a beautiful city in the middle of Riyadh that it needs occupants, and it will be very difficult to bring occupants to it. That would, an argument like that I'm having with you here, it needs to be said in Saudi Arabia, on Saudi Arabian television, on some form of a Saudi parliament, so we can work all together into guiding us to the future. I like many of his ideas, but I don't like the implementation. But can I say that? I think we should be able to say that. Somebody needs to say that without getting arrested. Just a very quick correction about the majority of the arrested intellectuals and clergies. They are not on the right wing, even though we are all on the right wing in Saudi Arabia. 90% of them are reformist.
So, of one kind or another, yes.
Yes, they are so reformist that you cannot even compare them to the official clergies who sit with the king every...
Well, but you couldn't call them, you can call them reformists. Very few could qualify as liberals, but they're reformists.
And there are many of them are liberals.
Some of them are.
And there's about 5 or 6 of them who are traditional Wahhabis who can fit very well within the current system that we have.
Fahad, does there need to be a reform of the structure of the manner in which Saudi Arabia is ruled right now, that there needs to be accountability on the people at the very top?
Well, again, if you look at the past 20, 25 years in Saudi Arabia, there have been reforms on many levels, political, economic, social. Reform is moving forward. It is a gradual pace, but frankly, it is a wise pace. It's a wise pace that has allowed Saudi Arabia to survive unscathed some of the very tumultuous events that happened across the region in what some people refer to as the Arab Spring, going back to 2011. I don't think that's a coincidence that the kingdom was not impacted by those events. Now, in terms of a public discourse, I think there is a fairly lively public discourse in Saudi Arabia, and you see it on social media every day. I spend probably too much time of my time on Twitter, and you see a very wide range of views. People do speak their mind. You see it in traditional media. Frankly, I don't think people give traditional media enough credit. It has changed dramatically over the past 20 years, not just with the satellite television, now where you have 24-hour news coverage and people having very lively discussions. But even mainstream newspapers discuss issues that, frankly, were not discussed for many years, including things like corruption and frankly, issues that used to be very sensitive in the past. Those are in the public. They're discussed by the media, and they're discussed by the Shura Council.
I find myself agreeing both with elements of what Jamal and Fahad were saying, in the sense that I do think that in the past few years we've seen a real consolidation and concentration of power, centralization of power, and a disruption of old ways of doing business. Now, what eventually needs to happen to build on some of the real things that Fahad was referring to, which some are positive, is you've got to create new processes or institutions. There is right now going on a generational shift in authority, where a new generation of royals is being promoted systematically by the Crown Prince. What's going to be needed, I think, is some real attention in coming years to creating institutions that fall between the king and the Crown Prince on the one hand, and then the middle class and the bulk of the royals on the other hand. There's going to be something in between.
Jamal, one question. What do we know about the Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Was he educated in Saudi Arabia?
He was educated in Saudi Arabia, but he elevated to power very, very fast. His first post when he was in his mid-20s was at Hayat al-Khubara, the committee of the senior advisors to the government. That's his first post that he got. And from that, he kept moving from one position to another. Very ambitious. People who knew him remember him speaking about reform and his vision for Saudi Arabia at an early stage. I met him only once. He captivated the audience. He's very much charismatic and structured his sentences very well. I think he could be the leader we were waiting for in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
But I just wish he will just broaden his decision-making process to include some form of a democratic process.
I do think it's necessary to emphasize that by all appearances, he and these measures, especially as packaged under corruption and cracking down on crooks and thieves, are enormously popular at the moment.
Very much.
Maysar, something that we have not talked about so far, and something that I do want to talk about, and that is the impact these reforms are going to have on Saudi women. We've heard of changes, Maysar, in the country. From June of next year, women will be able to drive in the country. There is an effort in the country to increase the participation of women in the workplace. At the moment, it's about 20%.
In the government.
Yes, it's about 22% right now. They want to push that up to 30% by 2030. So, Maysar, what does this mean for women in Saudi Arabia?
It's mean a lot for us. Actually, we have our right from many years ago, and it's applied from when King Abdullah started. Give the woman a right for her position or anything. But actually, for this point, there's like a right time to apply that currently. And so will be open many opportunity for women. Additionally, I think in next days we will have women to get a position in the Saudi embassy outside of the country or the consul or anywhere in the world.
Hussein, one final question.
Yes.
Has there been a precedent for what we are seeing in Saudi Arabia right now?
In Saudi Arabia, maybe the formation of the current and third Saudi state, which was done, again, in a very top-down way.
Yeah.
There were crackdown against the religious right, crackdown against some prominent people, etc. So you can compare this to the founding of the modern kingdom in the 20s and 30s. On the other hand, this is a different world and a different Saudi Arabia, and there's a different relationship within the society and between the society and the outside world. I'm a little skeptical about comparisons with what's happened in Arab republics under sort of secular dictators, military dictators. I think this is a little bit different, different context, different everything. But for sure, one-man autocratic rule, arbitrary rule of a single individual, no matter how ambitious and bold and intelligent, is not a way to run any country. So there's got to be an institutionalization of new processes. This is a must.
Okay, Fahad, do you want to say something?
Right. So you asked about Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and as everybody has already acknowledged, the overwhelming majority of Saudi Arabia's population is young. Some 70% is under the age of 30. Prince Mohammed is essentially from that generation. He has spent his entire life in Saudi Arabia. He understands Saudi Arabia's history very well. I think that is very clear to me. And frankly, in speaking to young Saudis, they're very fond of the way that he speaks. They find it very refreshing. He speaks with candor. He acknowledges that that mistakes have been made in the past. He acknowledges that there will be challenges in the present. But ultimately, his eye is always on the future. And we saw that in dramatic fashion at this event, the Future Investment Initiative event a few weeks ago, where he unveiled this, essentially what would become the first smart city in the world to be built from scratch. So Prince Mohammed has tremendous confidence in Saudi youth. He has confidence in the advisors that he has around him. And again, there's a mix, I think, of very sharp young talented advisors, but there's also some people with enough experience. So it's a good balance, and I think it creates a fairly hopeful setup for the
Eventually,
future.
audacity needs to be tempered with some humility at some point, though. I
Okay.
mean, that's for sure.
That's
In
what we-
everywhere. That's a universal.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.